G'day legends, I have a new and pretty exciting plugin to share with you today from a company called Time Off Audio, and the plugin is called Dime TT, and the TT stands for Transient and Tonal because this plugin splits your signal into two parts that you can process independently. You get the transient, which you can apply plugins to within Dime to manipulate and design how you want it to sound, and then you also have the tonal aspect, which allows you to manipulate the tail and the sustain of the sound and get really creative with sound designing. So this is what Dime looks like, and we've got two parts, transient and tonal. So this is what it's going to split our two signals into. And these little boxes on the side here is where we can load up to 4 plugins on each of these sections. So we click on this little cogwheel up here. So you can scan your VST3s, scan your audio units, and Dime will find all of your third-party plugins, which you can then load into these sections just by searching through here and adding them either to the transient or the tonal section. What this means is you can go absolutely nuts with sound designing. And rather than trying to explain it, I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of things that I have created with Dime. So the first one we're going to have a look at is how to create a ridiculously massive snare drum. So check this out. All right, so pretty crazy when you compare that bypass signal to the process signal. We've got this huge, monstrous snare sound. Now you might be like, whoa, that sounds kind of ridiculous, like it's way too big. Well, the cool thing about this as well is down the bottom here, we've got a little mixer section, and you can actually blend it back with a mix knob here. So check this out, you can really get the perfect sound here. Pretty awesome. So the mix knob is actually pretty powerful in this plugin because you can create some really wild sounds by processing the transient and the tonal sections, but then you can bring it all back into your original sound and create a whole new sound out of that. So there's just so many options for sound designing here. So while we check this out, I'm just going to put the mix back on 100%. So I'm going to bypass all of these plugins and run you through what I've done here. So you see all I have to do is come over here and click on the little power button to bypass them. Okay, so this is what the snare drum sounds like without any processing done to it, just running straight through Dime. So over on the right-hand side, you can see this slider. It lets us balance between the transient signal and the tonal signals. There's also a mix knob under here as well. So you can blend between the dry transient signal and what you create with the plugins that you add. Same for the tonal section, as well as a mix knob, as we discussed before, on the overall output. So there's all of these blending options. So it's really, really well thought out for just being able to create the perfect sound. Now we can just click on the little headphone here to just solo the transient section so we can hear what we're working on. Okay, so we've got that snap of the snare drum. Now the first plugin I added was Virtual Mix Rack. So I added some revival to this just to get a little bit of extra sparkle on the top end of that transient. And then after that, I added Black Box. It just adds some nice weight to that transient, makes it a little bit punchier. So we've made it way punchier, but it's still got that excitement to the top end. Now let's have a look at our tonal section. So it's already a nice, cool, roomy kind of tail to that snare sound, but I wanted to enhance this and make it sort of sustain a bit longer, but also to just be a little bit more aggressive and exciting. So I reached for Soundtoys Devil Lock. So that's my first plugin on here. Makes it sound really massive. This is just a crazy plugin for just crunching drums up. Now my next plugin, I wanted to add that extra tail to it. So we've got some Valhalla Vintage Verb. Making it sound massive. So I know it's a lot louder, but you can hear it's changed the signal quite a bit. It's making it way more sustained, way more reverby and big, and got a lot more tail to it. So it's sounding pretty cool. And I added one more plugin just for a little bit of experimentation here, and that was the Tail Chorus LX. I want to see if we could get some kind of interesting chorusy, phasey kind of effect going on with the tail. If you're going for a cool effect on the snare, then you could just have a little bit of that chorus in there just to get that really swirly effect. But I found just a small amount of that worked pretty well. Okay, let's bring our transient back in now. So that balance slider is awesome just for finding that perfect balance between transient and tonal. So let's play with it in the mix, and I'm gonna play with the mix sliders on the transient and the tonal section and see if we can find the perfect balance with all of these effects. So that sounds pretty cool to me. The transient can be pretty much at 100%, I think. I like that big thick transient it's got. And then if we bring the tonal section back to around a 50% blend, that gives us a really nice sustain and tail to the snare drum. That sounds awesome to me. Let's bypass it off and on. So awesome. You can already see the power of this plugin just by using it on a snare drum to get a massive, huge snare sound. Before we do our next example, it's worth noting that Dime really needs transient material to work well. If you've got a really compressed squash signal, Dime's not going to be able to pick up a transient and it's not going to be able to work the way it should. It's worth pointing out up the top here, we have our transient detection section. So we can play with these sliders to really dial in the transient and get it sounding right. Let's put them all the way to the left and dial this in. So around where we had it, it was perfect, around 70%, and around 330 to 350 milliseconds, we get a nice little bit of decay on the transient, and then that leaves us with the tonal aspect afterwards. So that's how you would dial it in. So for our next example, we're using a piano. So we've got some nice block chords, it's got a punchy transient on the front of it, and then we've got the sustain and tail after that. So let's check this out. So a pretty cool sound that we've created here. It sounds very much like something you'd hear probably in like an Enya song or something, a really plucky, cool, spacious kind of sound. So let me show you what I've done here. We've got a full rack of plugins on both the transient and tonal for this one. So this is the transient sound on its own. Now I've got Rabbit Tape from Safari Pedals as our first plugin, and basically I've just cranked the grit to 100% and then I've just played with the input and output just to add a little bit of character to this transient. Just makes it thicker, more interesting. Next up is Tail Chorus. We've got the wet signal pretty high and we're using the chorus 1 and 2 mode together. Check this out. So giving us a little bit of a swirling sound to the transient, which just makes it more interesting again. Now following this up with Super Plate from Sound Toys. This is just a really nice lush reverb. We've got it on the classic 140, and then we have a bit of modulation, rolled off some lows, rolled off some highs. The mix is at 86%. So pretty cool, adding some sustain and a lot more interest to this plucky sound. And then finally, we've got Pro Q3 for our last plugin. We're just doing a cut at 450 Hertz just to clean up the mids a bit and make it a little bit clearer. So let's bring in the tonal section now, and I'll show you the processing I applied to this. So this is what the tonal side sounds like. Now our first plugin is the ADA flanger from Brainworks. So just making that sustain sound a little bit more interesting and less piano-ish. Next up, we've got Crystallizer from Sound Toys. So just using a little bit of that, it's creating a bit of width and a little bit of interest. Next up is Hawk Phaser. Everyone loves a bit of phaser and stuff, and basically this is just giving us a nice swirling effect. Really cool plugin. And our last plugin, just doing some EQ with Pro Q3, high passing and low passing, just filtering it a bit and cutting some of the higher mids. I just wanted to condense this down a little bit more into the mids so it wasn't taking up so much space. So pretty cool. Let's bring in the transient now. So a massive transformation. Now what's cool is we can use the mix knob on the output to blend this back in with our piano sound. So let's play the track and find that sweet balance. So pretty cool. We basically created like a synth sound out of a piano track using Dime. So it's a really powerful sound designing tool. All right, I got one more example for you, and this one is a lead guitar. So I love how that sounds, taking that kind of boring, plucky kind of a lead guitar sound and then turning it into a wide, luscious lead guitar. Sounds really cool. So how do we process this one? Basically on the transient side, it sounds like this. We have added Echo Boy, which is a Sound Toys delay plugin, and I've got it on a dotted eighth. So giving us that U2 edge kind of sound. You remember those guys? The ones who put their album on everyone's phone without the masking? So that's all there is on the transient side. It's just the delay. So we're just getting that nice dotted delay sound. And then we're going to have a look at the tonal side. This is what it sounds like without any plugins on. Nothing too crazy there. You can hear a little bit of noise from the amp and stuff like that, but that doesn't matter too much. Then we're going to chuck on Safari Pedals Hawk Phaser again. Sounds like this. Here it's just adding a little bit of swirling to the sound. Then we're going to follow that up with Valhalla Supermassive, and I've just cranked this up to 74%, and then I've just pushed the warp over to 89%. So really nice paddish kind of effect going on there. Then our next plugin is Tremolator from Sound Toys, a tremolo style plugin, and I've used a preset called Dynamic Chopper. And originally it had the depth maxed out, so it was really choppy, and then I pulled it back just to make it a little bit smoother, and we get this cool pulsing effect. So pretty nice effect. And then lastly, we've got some EQ using Pro Q3. We've just got a high pass filter up to 160 Hertz, just get rid of some of that rumble from the amp. And then we're boosting on the sides at 480 Hertz, about 2.5 dBs. Which is just helping give us some nice width. So let's combine this with the transient section now. So So really cool. We've added some nice delay to the sound, but we've also added a paddish underlying effect as well. So that's kind of the power of being able to affect the transient and the tonal aspect. We can have two effects running at the same time. There you go, guys. That is Dime TT, a really powerful plugin for just designing and creating new textures within your mix. You can take really bland, boring sounds and turn them into something super interesting and elevate your mixes in some more fun and creative ways. If you guys want to try this plugin out for yourself, there is a link in the description below. Go give it a go and see what you can create with it. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support this channel, make sure you check out the link in the description below to my website. I've got a range of drum samples and mixing courses. Picking up any of those really helps support the time that goes into making videos like this. If you like massive drum sounds, then check out this next video coming up.